At this time, we want to say a special good morning and welcome to the Wake Up Call on Extreme 104.3, 88.5 FM to Honorable Curtis King. Good morning. The Education Minister has joined us this morning. Welcome back.
Good morning, Crystal, and good morning to our many listeners, home and abroad. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Yes, I'm back, as you said.
And depending on what time they listen as well, because we're live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, so they might be able to look at it later on during the day.
Okay.
All right, welcome back. So how are things? I know it's education has been the highlight for the past, 2-3 weeks? How have things been?
Well, I guess that has to do with the fact that schools were reopened on the 5th of September. Much to the dislike of some persons in opposition. But nevertheless, as usual, education is an important activity, and whenever school is in process, the entire country is mobilized. And as such, you will recognize that naturally, as Minister of Education and National Reconciliation, this will present some challenges because we have to ensure that we are monitoring the system to ensure that we are delivering the service that we ought to be delivering. And an added challenge this year is, well, not this year, every year around this time, first term, we are into the hurricane season. And therefore, we have to be working very closely with the Met Office and NEMO, the chair of the NEMO structure, that being the Prime Minister, or when he is absent, the acting Prime Minister, so that we can advise parents, guardians, and other stakeholders as to what sort of actions that they would be required to take whenever there's a threat of some weather system that could be disruptive or even dangerous. So, yes, my hands have failed, but that is the essence of life, and that has always been the essence of my life. Working. All
right.
Solving, yes.
As you mentioned, the management of the first term, it being very difficult because of the weather systems and school is open. How difficult is it to respond to the weather?
Well, again, let us face it. Science has provided us with a lot of knowledge. And while we will not be 100% accurate, and when I speak here about we now, I'm being general in that I'm talking about those persons involved in predicting the weather and so on and so on, because we have to depend on them for guidance. So what I would say, what I found is that social media has provided a platform for persons, and persons use social media for all sorts of different reasons. Sometimes though, I pray that persons will be a little bit more, how to put it, more responsible in how they use social media. Now, there's no doubt that we are going to be faced with difficult weather conditions from time to time during this storm. The Ministry of Education, we have to work closely, as I indicated earlier, with the people dealing with the weather and NEMO. And we depend on them for advice in terms of what actions do we take. Because St. Vincent and the Grenadines is a small country, but it is very exposed, if you like, to the vagaries of the weather and natural events. We just came out of a volcanic eruption. So naturally, above everything else, safety is our major concern. Safety for the teachers, the students, and all other stakeholders who are using our facilities. And therefore, whenever weather system approaches, we have to make sure that we have proper advice, and we make a decision on which we can stand. Now, I'd give you an example. Just earlier this week, yesterday to be precise, and even the day before yesterday, we were told, and the persons listening to the weather news, persons listening to the news would know that we had a system, but not a well-defined system in the sense that it was strong enough, then put it this way, to issue, if you like, a warning of any of the major features of the weather that could be disruptive. Yes, we had a flood watch, but that is the extent to which it got. Now, we were advised that, look, the conditions would be difficult like early in the morning, but as the day proceeded, there would be less difficult conditions. And as such, with that advice, we decided to keep school open. But some persons, in the first place, what I consider to be real irresponsible, because it was done by a media house or somebody in the media, where what was done, they reposted or posted, whatever, what basically was an advisory that clearly was doctored from a period before, that they claim came out from the Ministry of Education, stating that there would be no school. But then again, that's why I'm saying sometimes the people don't even read what is before them. Because if you force the appearance of that advisory, one could see that something is wrong, because there's nothing whatsoever about the Ministry of Education there, yes, to indicate that it was coming from the Ministry of Education. But very importantly, if you read it, you could see that it couldn't be relating to yesterday, because they were saying school will remain closed. The day before, school was not closed. Yes? And obviously, people don't really read in any great detail. A lot of persons, I shouldn't say people, a lot of persons who use social media, they just look at the caption, the heading, and they read some of the comments, and that basically is sufficient for them. And they just run with this story. So I am warning the public, look, we meaning the Ministry of Education, will make the official releases as to when school will be closed and not closed. Any other releases coming from, well, I shouldn't say releases, any other posts coming from other quarters are not authentic.
Okay.
Fortunately, we were able to point out that that was fake, but it had caused a lot of disruption. I want to make the other point that I was saying that we are a small state and we are really exposed to the vagaries of the weather system. Now, if you take, for example, the Grenadines, we have students traveling on a daily basis from Beckwith to St. Vincent. And these students, they attend secondary schools as far as in Maracay to Kingston. Now, whenever there's a weather system and there are warning or advisory, if you like, on the Beckwith Channel in terms of its roughness and its potential danger, obviously, the ship operators are not going to be having their daily or scheduled services, boat services between the island. And as such, we have to be on top of that. So if you take, for example, Crystal, on Monday, we had very early realized what was happening, but the boat had left Beckwith and had already brought up students. The boat had indicated, the operators had indicated that they were returning to Beckwith at 10:30 a.m. and they could not guarantee that they would be returning from Beckwith to St. Vincent for the regular scheduled 4 p.m. or 6 p.m. Trips back down to Beckwith. So we then had to get in touch with the transportation people so that we could get the school buses, whether they be private or government, to pick up the students from Maraqua, from Kingston, to get them to the wharf at 10:30, well, before 10:30, so that they could take the 10:30 boat down. And we were able to do that successfully. So I'm saying, and sorry, there's also a next hub, if I could put it this way, in the Southern Grenadines, where a number of students travel to Union Island, especially from Myro, to attend secondary school there. So again, we have to be conscious of what is happening weather-wise so that we could advise parents as to what to do.
Difficult indeed. Can you address the time that advisories are sent out by the Ministry of Education? Looking at and listening to people's responses yesterday, some persons were saying, could it be done earlier?
But generally we do so early. What happened yesterday? And clearly, this was not a call to parents, an advisory to parents that school would have been closed. Now, I should have mentioned this also. Now, since the eruption of the La Soufrière volcano, we are faced with a lot of challenges every time there is heavy rainfall in the northern part of the country, especially the North Windward area, because of the presence of some rivers up there that once these rivers come down, as the people say, they pose a great threat to persons trying to cross. And as such, we always have to be mindful and be on top of the ball in terms of advising those parents not to send their children to school. And that was done since Monday, so that yesterday it wasn't an issue. What happened yesterday though, clearly with the level of rainfall that we are having, the soils are saturated and there are some areas below, let us say the dry river, that you're going to find the risk of land slippage, landslides and so on. And those also pose threat to commuters, to persons using the roads. And not just in the northern part of the country. I mean, in West St. George constituency, for example, we have an area that is very prone to landslide. So basically what we did, we put out an advisory, basically asking parents to use their discretion when it concerns they live in an area that basically pose certain threat to their safety. And that is natural. You know, people are making a fuss over that. Actually, and I want to make this point. I saw no less a person than a teacher talking about they have 3 rivers to cross to get to work. Now, yesterday, all the advice suggested to us that the weather conditions would have improved, despite the fact that the forecast was for periodic rainfall and so on. You how the whole works. But the Met Office had advised that as the day proceeded, the weather conditions would have gotten better. Now, if we are going on the scientific advice, we couldn't just close school. So what do? You close school every time some rain fall? We close school when we are advised that there's basically a threat to person's safety. That's how you do it in a civilized society.
Okay.
If you do otherwise, basically you would have what some of them want, chaos. But we are not about that. And I have always indicated, look man, we are going to have challenges, but we're not going to throw our hands up in the air and surrender. We are going to face these challenges. And I'm telling you, we have been managing this system. We have had great experience over the years. I'm just the last in a whole line of ministers. So we are going to have schools when the time is there for us to have school. Because let us not face it, and I make this point, we have lost significant time from schooling. And it is for us to make sure that we reduce any loss and make up on some of those losses. So
All right.
we are not going to depend solely on some post on social media to make decisions and to make policies.
Okay, fair point. Now, I was seeing some other people, including some teachers, were complaining about MS Teams, and it's not so easy to turn on online teaching at such short notice. Is there anything in place, and this is a more technical question, for those complaints to be addressed?
One, we have a technical unit within the Ministry of Education that would provide support. I know, for example, some schools have reached out to the unit requesting assistance in ensuring that, for example, the grade K students get onto the system. But again, Christelle, a lot of it depends on what is happening at the school. We have said over and over, we have written to the schools, and even in this new term, we have indicated to schools that yes, we have the system. Some schools use Google platforms, some use Microsoft Teams. Look, whenever you have interruptions like these, you should be able to use the platforms to assist those students who are at home. And I have known schools that up to yesterday did that. I mean, I could commend a teacher, I know of a particular teacher that basically, and I'm not talking about just sending work, but actually allow for the participation of her students who are at home in her class. She had about 5 students in the class, and she was able to engage others. Now, let us not, though, forget that in a situation where the weather is challenging, you could lose electricity, and hence the internet could be a problem. I mean, we have to work with all of these difficulties, so we understand that. But I'm saying, we have said always that these platforms, you have had training, you have had experiences using these. It is not for you to abandon because there's no longer any volcanic eruption and so on. The more you use this program, it's the more, basically efficient you will become in utilizing this. And the students, it don't take a lot for the students to be so engaged.
Right.
So I'm saying, yes, we have challenges, but these things can be done. But where teachers have issues, again, I will encourage them to reach out to the Ministry of Education where they could get that sort of technical support.
Okay, so it's not, you don't go to the principal, just go straight to the ministry.
No.
There you go.
No.
Don't want to have any misinterpretation here.
Let us put it this way.
Uh-huh.
The schools, obviously, any teacher in the system now who does not know that you have to go through your supervisor
Right.
to get to anywhere. You go to your head of department or to get to your principal, or sometimes there are times when you go to the deputy or what have you. But the principal would make that report on behalf of the school. Don't forget also that the schools have a system in place to know. They have their own IT unit, if I could put it that way.
All
and they
schools?
have, well, I can't say all schools would have functioning units, but all schools would have had that sort of structure in place, because we just came out not too long ago of a system where all schools were basically on the online mode of delivery of our teaching learning process.
All right. Let's move on a little bit to our CSEC results for 2022.
Yes.
The first question there is the comparison between 2019 results and 2022. Why wasn't the comparison between 2021 and 2022?
And let me explain this again. I just want to take some time out to do so. I'm answering. Now, I was on WFM. What is the API's program? Manning. That's how they pronounce it.
Well, dialect, so yeah, Manning.
And also on social media, explaining that since the COVID-19 pandemic, and we have had the pandemic since 2020, followed by the explosive eruption of the La Soufrière volcano. The Caribbean students who take the CXC program were forced, if you like, into a situation where their schooling was disruptive, and so were in a difficult position when it come to writing the regular CXC exam, meaning the two papers, paper 1 and paper 2, the multiple choice and the long paper, as well as the SBAs and other practical subjects. So that the last time that paper was written in St. Vincent and the Grenadines was 2019. All Caribbean students wrote only one paper in 2020, sorry. However, with the explosive eruption of the volcano in 2021, remember, we led the charge. We negotiated with CXC, and I heard some people talking about leadership. I laugh. We led the charge. And a matter of fact, this minister led the charge to have CXC to do a second sitting, which CXC had never done in its history. And CXC basically started offering exams in 1979. But in 2021, on our advocacy, they offer a second sitting only for the students of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And I have to once again thank CXC for understanding the difficulties that our students experience, and so acceded to our request. Now, that was 2021. So, whereas the other Caribbean students wrote the two papers in 2021, we did not. So, we did not write the two papers in 2020. We did not write the two papers in 2021. So, we returned to writing the two papers in 2022. Now, clearly, if you're going to have a comparison that makes sense, and put it this way, that is fair, then we have to compare the results of 2022 with the results of 2019, since those 2 years we had students doing both papers. Now, that, however, is not to make an excuse for the students' performances. And I will tell you why. Because anybody with, well, let me go down there. I just say that persons would know that performances are not based on any single factor. They are based on several factors. There are going to be times when one factor might impact more significantly than others. But the truth is, you can't just say that the results were so and so because of one factor. And additionally, and I want to make this point because I want to come back, Crystal, and commend our students, and commend our teachers, and commend our parents, guardians, and stakeholders for the wonderful efforts in preparing our students, because under the circumstances, our students did well. And I have rated their performances from, that is to say, the most successful ones, from commendable to excellent. Now, why I'm saying all of this, Crystal, these students, and never mind, the people don't read, as I say, a lot of people who comment in social media, they don't take time to read, you just look at the headline. I have said, and I would repeat it, I have said, look, what happened to these students who wrote CSEC this year? These students in 2020 were in Form 3. Follow with me, and we have Dassey.
Okay.
Yeah, you
government name there.
He went grammar school, so he knows. Now, you look at what happened to these students. 2020, third term. Remember, we discovered COVID. Well, in our case, I think we had our first case in March
of 2020, correct?
Good. School was in the second term, and we closed school 2 weeks earlier than normal. We did not have any school in the third term for the entire third term. These are students in Form 3, and we know that the third term is crucial. In fact, if you look at how schools allocate their marks, the third term carries 60% of the marks that you need to move on, to the next form. 60%. So you know how important that term is. You know how serious the work will be pushing that term. The Form 3 students didn't have that. They went back to school September of 2020. Mm-hmm. They had the entire term. Good. But come January 2021 of that same school year, there was a spike, and hence there was no face-to-face instruction.
Right. So this is the Form 3 students. They're now in Form 4.
Yes.
Okay.
They're now on Form 4.
Following.
Right.
And
then we decided to put them online. Of course, we know the challenges with online teaching, but as if that wasn't bad. In April, when we were planning to return to school, we had the volcanic eruption. And that did two things. It forced many of our students from their homes and place them into shelters. You see the disruption there?
Right.
It meant also that most of our schools in the safe zones were occupied by persons as they sought refuge, basically, from the eruption of the volcano. So I'm saying it was disruptive. So even in that period, it was difficult for online teaching for those students. And they have no face-to-face. Preparation is a challenge. Mm-hmm. But that is not all. When those students entered Form 5, people just forget, And I want to remind persons were so concerned about their preparation, including, and rightly so, the teachers union, leadership, and teachers in general, and all stakeholders. But persons were actually calling for us to abandon the idea of writing CXC that year. You remember that discussion? Remember that talk? People were arguing that. That is when we came up with the idea that, look, CXC has to accommodate us. So I'm saying those students suffered greatly in terms of their level of preparation. And put into context that they would have been writing 2 papers for the first time after 2 years. We could see. And that's why I would keep repeating it. I take my hat off to those students. They perform in these circumstances that were very difficult. And let me just end by saying, nevertheless, we are doing a detailed analysis. We are the Ministry of Education because, let's face it, we have had challenges before. And we know of some of the difficulties even before COVID-19 and the volcanic eruption. And we have been seeking to address these. But what has happened over the last 2 years? Of course, more light has being shown
Right.
and these issues, and it begs us to move with some level of urgency to deal with them.
Okay. So we've dealt with the third form students who moved up to Form 4
Yeah,
and then moved up
yeah.
to Form 5 and then wrote the
Yeah.
2 papers this year.
Yeah.
But you did not highlight the possibility or how the absence of teachers because
Yes, sorry.
you did
sorry,
not highlight
sorry,
that as
sorry,
being a
sorry.
factor to affect their performance at CSEC.
Okay, sorry. And let me say this, Krista. If you listen to all the comments I've made on this issue, if you read my Facebook post of 7th of September, 2 days after the results came to the students, 2 days after the students were able to access their
Okay.
result.
It's right there, actually.
Right. If you read it, you would see that I've always indicated 3 major factors among the many. The challenges. I have identified one, the volcanic eruption, the pandemic, and I've said teachers who were lost. Check it out. It is there.
Loss of some of our teachers. End of
Exactly.
quote.
Exactly.
Yes. So
So this omission is not deliberate at all.
Okay.
Yes, we recognize that you would have lost. I mean that some of our students would have lost some of their teachers, and naturally it would impact, or it would have impacted on some of the students' performances. But this universal thing that we want to give, I could tell you there are schools, and I could call them in this case, there's St. Vincent Grammar School that lost quite a large number
how
of
many?
the, when I say large, sorry, let me put, they're about, I think in their case it would be about 5 to 7. But what I'm making, the point I'm making, I call this school because it was significantly affected in that, like, because some of the students, some of the teachers there, most of them were teaching Form 5, but they perform. So you see why I'm saying that there's no single factor. At another school that lost less, their performances went down significantly. So I'm saying, yes, I mean, I repeat, Krista, I repeat that there would have been several factors responsible.
Right.
And it is for us now to do a detailed analysis and to see where we could address the gaps.
Yes, and that's understood. For critics who are pointing a lot of fingers at the absence of the teachers due to the vaccine or not taking the vaccine, how do you ascertain which of these elements had the greatest impact?
Clearly, as I'm saying, the analysis is being done, so I'm not going to put anything out there
Okay.
in terms of which one. But I have made the point over and over. And I make it all the time. Because, you know, some people think posting negative things about me going to change who I am. Never. I know who I am. And I know what I am about. I would say that clearly, in our case where, persons are sold and promoting their own narrative to support their position, they're going to have all that being thrown into the works, and persons are going to say, oh, this was the case and this was the case. But I keep saying to people, we made every effort to ensure that our students receive face-to-face instruction. From basic thing of providing a learning hub for those who are doing the exams so that they could have face-to-face, to replacing teachers who were not there. We have made every effort.
Right.
Yeah. So I have no difficulty in reconciling with what happened. As I'm saying, it's for us to do the analysis, and when we do the analysis, we keep making the corrective, taking the corrective measures that we ought to take.
Okay. Could you comment on, after this question, we have to take a break. When we come back,
Yeah.
we will entertain questions and calls from the listeners.
Yes.
Are you able to comment on the current landscape in terms of the number of teachers? How many more teachers are needed to fill the void that was created before?
Look, I have, and Crystal, I usually do this, so you have to bear with me. Now, as far as I'm concerned, when we were faced with the issue, and we said this publicly, we employed teachers on a contractual basis. After that period, yes, we moved to filling the vacancies. And we said to everyone, including teachers who had initially not taken the vaccine, look, come back and you would get back your jobs. In the initial period, and again, because I want to make it, and I know some of them would get vexed, while y'all could vex for the rest of your lives. But I'm speaking truth. And I am always mindful that one must speak the truth. So, I'm saying again, I am dealing with the permanent establishment. And in terms of the permanent establishment, you have non-pensionable and pensionable teachers. And I'm saying, initially, 212 teachers, from what we know, did not take the vaccine. Some were on the permanent establishment, some were temporary.
Okay.
Now, I'm saying that by the end of the second term, 30 of the permanent, 30 teachers on the permanent establishment had returned. And they returned because they took the vaccine. And they were restored to their substantive position. The only loss they would have encountered, some of them in the latter part of who joined back in the latter part of 2022, obviously would have missed some months of teaching, and hence they could not have been paid. Now, after that, there were two others who took the vaccine and who were pending and returned. After the measures, you remember we if you like, reduced the measures in July, late July. After that, 10 teachers who didn't take the vaccine, because we said no, you could return without having to take the vaccine. 10 such teachers returned. And I know they talk about the thing. There were 4 graduates, that is to say university trained, and 6 teacher trained. Remember, I'm saying I am only dealing with the permanent establishment.
Okay.
Those 10 return, and again, like we have said over and over, they return to their substantive position. Their only loss, again, would be that they would not have been paid for the time that they were out of the system. And finally, as I speak, I know that there are 8 other teachers who reapplied after the deadline. In fact, we made appointments as late as the 2nd of September. Yes? Now clearly, if you apply after the deadline, I mean, that is basically out of our hands. So those would naturally go to the process. So the point I'm making is that we have made every effort. And by the way, we must also remember that some persons opted for early retirement. Yes?
That's an even greater void, isn't it?
Huh?
That's an even greater void, isn't it?
That is before it ain't avoid knowing that we were able, as I'm saying, to deal with all that because we know that we had that information. And let me tell you something, Crystal. When we make appointment, the impression is given that you're bringing in people who just leave school, so to speak. Look, we have appointed persons and promotion because we have trained persons in the system who are not appointed in. But this government has given its commitment and we do so all the time. So we right now, I could say we have already appointed an permanent establishment between the 23rd of August and September 2nd. Over 150 persons.
Over 150.
Yeah.
So we're good with the number of teachers then?
I would always remind persons that there are some subject areas, especially at the secondary level, where you always have a challenge. And we know it. Math, some of the sciences. And we are forever seeking to deal with these issues. So don't kill me if there might be a situation where a school is in need of a math or science teacher as of today that they have not yet received. Because even as we talk, we are still looking for trained and qualified persons in those areas.
All right. Thank you so much for that response. Now we have to take a break right now. We got to pay some bills and come back. What we're going to do is we're going to end the live